Hi there. Wanted to give you a catch up on how things are going with the writing of the sequel to There, My Dear, and something just popped into my mind recently. In the last few days, there's been Mental Health Awareness Day, and that made me think about a number of the characters in There, My Dear, and where we pick up with them in the sequel. And there are references most definitely to mental health across a number of the characters in There, My Dear and the sequel. And I just wanted to read an excerpt from an early chapter from the sequel. And it's really quite personal because it depicts a panic attack. And over the last few years, for a number of different reasons, a number of different things have happened in my life over the last few years that have led me to into a period of mental ill health, basically, around anxiety. Not so much depression, but certainly anxiety and panic attacks, and they're terrifying moments in anyone's life. So if you've had any experience of panic attacks yourself, maybe you'll be able to relate to this. But here goes. Just to give you a flavour of the kind of things I'm trying to get across in the sequel. Now his head was in his hands, and the detachment from his own surroundings meant that all he knew at that moment was the torment of his own mind. Images of his father's body, his blood spattered across the old sofa and on the carpet, and the echo of the single gunshot filled his head. Dylan had to get away from this. As he shot to his feet, he heard a tortured cry and felt his heart rate quicken. The cry was his own, and he looked around to see if there was anybody in earshot. Panic squeezed his heart, and he started to pant in order to control his breathing. He had to get away from his own thoughts, away from the panic, away from himself. Dylan stumbled around the room, turning his head this way and that, looking for somewhere to hide. The irregular pounding of his heart could not be controlled, and the panic deepened. He dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around himself, trying to win back control. Another groan filled his ears, and he realised he had no way of stopping the attack. His breath kept catching the top of his lungs, and he could feel his heart booming in his throat. When he stood up, he nearly lost balance and reached out for the desk in front of him. As his hand reached the polished surface, he realised that his palms were covered in sweat. He leant heavily on the desk, and slowly his faintness eased. With his eyes closed, he panted in bursts, emitting a shallow, laugh-like sound that somehow comforted him. What was that? His own voice sounded weak and unfamiliar to him. As he tried to stand straight again, he struggled to suck air to the depths of his lungs. Somehow, he thought that if he did so, he would have a heart attack and die on the spot. Once more, he squatted to his haunches and leant his shoulder against the leg of the desk. He started to shiver as a cold sweat engulfed him, and he knew that the only thing he could do was get away from himself. Quicker than he should have, he rose to his feet and immediately felt oblivion behind and above him. He wanted to run, but he was paralysed. Fear and anger, with his own surrender to that fear, forced him to focus on his own death, for he was sure that his life would end at any moment. At that time, he knew he was half sobbing. It was his only form of defence against the terrors in his mind and the absolute foreboding in the pit of his stomach. Hearing his own decimated voice meant that he was not yet dead. The language I've used in there, the depiction there of a panic attack, is very personal to me, and it'd be wrong for me to assume that everyone's panic attacks are the same. But that sensation of wanting to get away from yourself was a big thing for me. But yeah, the fear that is absolutely all-consuming. And if you might be able to relate to this, but I found when I had a pretty big panic attack, I was exhausted for quite some time after, mentally and physically, and that's what I'm trying to go over in that little piece there. So a lot of talk about mental health and the awareness of it. I think the figures are quite something. I think 1 in 4 of us are supposed to suffer with some form of mental ill health at some point in our lives, and I think talking about it and being open with it is obviously the way forward. And I hope you enjoyed that little bit of a reading there, and I'll keep you posted.